Wow, love your place.
Thanks. It was a total score. We got it from this old married couple who posted it on the Wesleyan alumni group. We even got them to leave their swords.
Wow, nice touch.
Get out. Get out. I mean it.
Okay, so this one's a little personal. How I Met Your Mother was one of the first shows I actively decided to watch and actually cared about. It was at its peak popularity when I was in high school, and I've enjoyed rewatching it since. Now, normally, when they announce reboots, I try my best just to ignore them. But How I Met Your Father had a pretty easy job, so I let myself get a little bit excited for it. The criteria for How I Met Your Father was pretty simple. Unlike, for example, Pretty Little Liars, where you basically have to have someone die or go missing and then have a group of teens be stalked by a violent predator, or a literal sequel with the exact same characters, How I Met Your Father really could have been about almost anything. There's no stringent criteria. At its core, How I Met Your Mother is just boy meets girl. That's a story trope we never get tired of, and it comes in endless forms. And by boy meets girl, I mean any genders. It's really just person meets person, and they fall in love. That's easy. Now, obviously, How I Met Your Mother does have more to it than that. It's got its own place in our cultural TV landscape because of its unique sense of humor, pacing, and emotional resonance. So, How I Met Your Father really had two options. One, do its own thing, which could be literally anything. The only mandatory criterion is that the narrator at some point meet the kid's father. That's all. We could have been in any city, we could have had any genre, we could have had a fresh spin on the concept. Or two, attempt to recapture the exact specific vibe of How I Met Your Mother in a direct remake. So, which did we get? Neither. The best way I can describe How I Met Your Father is cowardly. It's too scared to deviate from the blueprint and do something fresh and original, but it's also too scared to be as bold as How I Met Your Mother was. So what we get is just It's just about watchable. It's kind of hard to describe actually because it's so very unremarkable. That's part of the cowardice problem. How I Met Your Mother was able to do over-the-top theatrical nonsense and feel very human and normal. And How I Met Your Father can't do both those things or pick a specific lane. So it lands somewhere in the middle, making all of the characters just seem really weird. They kind of act like aliens who have seen one episode of How I Met Your Mother and are pretending to be human based on it. Fans of the original show like myself might enjoy the nostalgia of the concept and watch the rest of How I Met Your Father, but I really cannot imagine someone who hasn't seen How I Met Your Mother enjoying any of How I Met Your Father. It's just not good enough and doesn't make a lot of sense on its own. So, for the uninitiated, How I Met Your Mother is a framed narrative where an older narrator tells his kids the story of how he, Ted Mosby, met their mother, Tracy. The whole thing is basically a series of flashbacks, so when everything starts, Ted is a single architect living in Manhattan with two friends from college, Marshall and Lily, who are engaged to each other. They all also hang out with an eccentric womanizer, Barney, and quickly they all become friends with Ted's on-again, off-again love interest, career-focused Robin. How I Met Your Father uses the same structure to tell the story of Sophie, who is a single photographer living with best friend Valentina, and Valentina's very new boyfriend Charlie, who's just moved from England. Sophie can't find the right guy until she meets Ian online, but sadly Ian leaves to go on a research trip in the first episode, and they only really have one date together. The same night of her date, Sophie meets Jesse, an Uber driver and musician, along with Jesse's friend Sid, Sid's fiancée Hannah, and Jesse's sister Ellen, who has just moved to the city as well. So right off the bat, it's a lot messier. Sophie and Valentina are pre-existing friends, as are Jesse and Sid, but everyone else is pretty much meeting each other in live time as we meet them. In How I Met Your Mother, Robin is really the only new addition, and because the core group is much tighter and more focused, she swiftly feels established. It's definitely, though, worth noting that How I Met Your Father makes a huge improvement when it comes to diversity, involving characters of different races and sexualities in the main cast. That is a huge flaw of How I Met Your Mother that simply isn't excusable and makes no sense in the setting of Manhattan. So, I've seen a lot of people online saying, don't compare these shows, let's let How I Met Your Father be its own thing, don't be unfair, but it doesn't give us that option. It doesn't have its own flavor or effect at all. And it totally fails to capture the original effect of its predecessor, though. So let's take a look at why How I Met Your Father does fall short of its promise by comparing aspects of it to the original. I think there are three large areas of failure. the story world or universe, the hero, and the core friend group. So we'll walk through each of those, but first, let's do an episode-to-episode comparison from the first season of each show. How I Met Your Mother Season 1 Episode 5, OK Awesome, and How I Met Your Father Season 1 Episode 2, FOMO, are both episodes that feature the groups heading to fancy clubs for a big night out. FOMO is very clearly designed to be a callback to OK Awesome, and there are even some shot-by-shot remakes, and they even use some of the same club music. But the episode is a complete disaster. So, starting with OK Awesome.
Okay, awesome!
What's going on? Did I just have a stroke?
Adult Ted opens the story by saying, "So kids, do you want to hear about the time I went deaf?" Which launches straight into classic How I Met Your Mother humor. This episode divides the group between single people and the married couple. Each character has a mini story within the episode that all unite under a common narrative. So, Robin has been recognized at her gym for her journalism and has been invited to a highly exclusive club called OK. She invites Ted and Barney and even sets Ted up with a friend at the club, and she's feeling really cool and successful and important until she can't get into the VIP room and ultimately ends up sitting outside on the curb instead. Ted wants to hit it off with his date, but the music is too loud, he ends up embarrassing himself and hanging out with the coat check girl all night instead as well. Barney isn't all that significant this episode, but his one-night stand attempt flops, and as usual, he's held in direct contrast to Marshall and Lily with his extreme Lothario single life. So the single people each chase something that they ultimately can't get. Meanwhile, the married couple have a similar experience, but in a different setting. Lily has been feeling immature compared to her colleagues, so she and Marshall host a wine-tasting soiree at their apartment instead of going out. And Marshall hates it. He's super bored, he's really annoyed that Ted didn't invite him to the club, so he's got something to prove. He ditches his own party, and he meets everyone at OK. He's actually shortly followed by Lily, who also ditches her guests and ends up sitting on the curb with Robin. And their conversation, Lily and Robin's, is really the heart of the episode. Lily is super anxious that she's not where she needs to be in life, that she and Marshall are acting too young, that they have to go forward, they can't go backward. And Robin says, no, look, you can go whatever direction you want, so where do you want to go? And together, in a callback to Lily's college self, they flash the bouncer and get back inside so Lily can find Marshall, which is all she truly cared about. As the episode ends, Ted, Barney, Lily, and Marshall take a cab home together, and Marshall and Ted open up to each other about where they're each at in life. Lily really has the best journey this episode, starting off feeling like she has to mature, and ultimately crashing on Ted's shoulder in the cab. But everyone's mini journeys connect. They each try to force something in their lives that just isn't there. It's a great episode that takes us from a simple night out, the night Ted almost went deaf, and lands on a really beautiful look at life and how you can't compare where you are to where others are. You can't force yourself into certain stages of life. All you can do is rest on your friend's shoulder. Okay, let's look at the How I Met Your Father counterpart episode. It is not good. Partially, this is the dialogue and lack of humor, not for lack of trying, but rather for trying way too hard. It's miss after miss after miss with the jokes, and anytime they sense a good joke, they double down on it and ruin it.
Have your cake and eat it too.
I actually hate cake. Too hoity-toity. I'm more of a bread guy. Plain old bread that I rip up with my rough, calloused hands.
So, Sophie is still hung up on Ian. It's only episode 2. Adult Sophie tells her kid right away, first piece of dialogue, that younger Sophie wasn't living in the moment. She was living on her phone. So, we know what the point of the episode is gonna be right off the bat. Anyway, Valentina, meanwhile, is feeling suffocated by Charlie's constant presence, so they decide to go out and invite their new friends, Jesse, Sid, and Ellen, as a friend set up for Charlie. Meanwhile, Sid convinces Jesse that it's really a romantic setup for Jesse and Sophie. So they go out. Ellen wants to live it up and find a woman to get with, kind of like Barney, she's on the hunt to get with someone. Charlie realizes Valentina has been lying to him, and when he confronts her about it, she breaks up with him. Then a few minutes later, they get back together. Jesse tries to have a drink alone with Sophie, but she accidentally stands him up because she sees something that reminds her of Ian, and she and Valentina have a moment sitting on the curb just like their predecessors. The episode ends with the whole crew back at Sid's bar, where they have a quieter drink and sort of commiserate. So, first things first, it doesn't hold up as an episode because it's pretty much just a random set of events. Charlie and Valentina exemplify this. I have no idea why they're together in the first place. They just seem to annoy each other. They don't know each other well at all. They don't have chemistry or any shared interests or anything in common, so I've got nothing to root for. And I don't care. Break up. Don't break up. Whatever. Valentina lies to Charlie. Then when Charlie finds out, she just dumps him. She accepts that she's single. Then she gets back together with him, and they have sex in a closet. I don't know what the point of any of that was. Obviously, moving in together right away like that when Charlie has no other friends was a really bad idea. The conflict is just that they were being stupid. Jesse is reluctant to put himself out there again, but he takes his friend's advice and he tries it on with Sophie, and when she shuts him down very nicely, he's back where he started, but he's got a new friend, and that was also episode 1 for him, but whatever. Sophie starts the episode trying but failing to live in the moment, and though she fails throughout, at the very end, voiceover Sophie tells us that sometimes you really can just be, without wondering where else you could or should be. That's a nice message, but it's not earned at all throughout the episode. Sophie doesn't have that realization in real time. She doesn't change or realize anything. She's not ready for Jesse, she's into Ian, and she didn't miss out on anything by being on her phone. It's not like once she realized she blew it with Jesse, she regretted it. Ellen strikes out over and over, but is just this happy little, elf character who's just buzzing to be in New York City, so has a blast anyway. Okay. And also Sid is there. It's a really bad episode, and I really tried to enjoy it. I like Ellen, I like Sid, but they had no purpose there. And it's not just the forced dialogue and lack of characterization, it's also that clearly the writers had this idea. Hey, there's a great story, you should live in the moment. And then forced it onto a tribute How I Met Your Mother episode that didn't match up with the message at all. There are a few highlights, Charlie and Sid bonding at the very end, and Sophie and Jesse having the same comfort song are really nice touches, but unlike the How I Met Your Mother Blueprint episode, it fails to come together as one cohesive, meaningful knot. Adult Sophie has started the episode by saying people weren't living in the moment, and she ends by saying, but sometimes they were. That's all. No point to any of the plot whatsoever. Nothing is earned, no one develops, and adult Sophie is used in this episode and for the rest of the season as a narrative crutch to instruct the audience on what the point of the story is, since the story isn't good enough to speak for itself. The sprawling, untidy nature of this episode actually exemplifies the whole season's problem, in that nothing connects. So Sophie, as I've said, doesn't have a journey throughout the episode at all, but obviously her spending time on her phone relates to the supposed theme of the episode, the declared theme of the episode, but not a single supporting character has anything to do with the theme. It's just Sophie. The How I Met Your Mother episode sneaks up on you. There's no ostensible meaning to the night out at the outset, but as each character fails to get what they want and realizes you can't force life to be what you think it should be, the meaning of the story hits you unexpectedly by the end. How I Met Your Father goes to weird lengths to tick off the aesthetic boxes necessary to classify itself as a remake, so why doesn't it feel like one? Let's start off with the story world. Every TV show ever made creates a fictional universe, a story world, even if it's realistic, even if it's a documentary, just the choices of what's included, the camera angles, the editing, the time jumps, and so forth. And a huge part of the unique effect of How I Met Your Mother is that universe. Yes, we're in New York City, and all the characters lead vaguely realistic lives, but How I Met Your Mother creates a unique story world by the sort of rules it establishes. For example, every woman Barney hooks up with is gullible and pretty dumb. Problematic implications aside, this rhythm to Barney's plots is so well established that disrupting it when he encounters an intelligent, challenging woman is disruptive to us as the audience as well. We're so used to seeing him pull off ridiculous stunts and always get the girl that we've come to subconsciously learn a rule of the How I Met Your Mother universe. More broadly, we're gonna have plenty of cartoonish characters, but they're all going to fit the same brand of humor and use repeated vernacular. How I Met Your Mother is famous for its long-standing jokes. Even within one season, we get well-known classics like Legend Wait For It Dairy or Suit Up, but it's also the tiny in-references that aren't explicitly designed as jokes that triumph too. These do more than make for good humor and reward a shrewd audience, they also build the world in which the show operates. In the How I Met Your Mother version of New York, tiny details matter, they resurface, they build on themselves in a way that makes this group of friends feel like they have their own version of the city, that they're operating in their own little universe. So then, the exaggerated silly scenes like the drunk train or robots versus wrestlers don't stand out as weird anomalies, but rather fit into the world they've subtly been building through innocuous dialogue, running gags, repeated symbols, repeated structures of humor put into different contexts. Most significantly, though, is the idea of magic, and not just Barney's insane magic tricks. So, one repeated motif is that Ted's favorite book is Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which comes up multiple times and relates thematically to Ted and Robin as a love story. But it's also perhaps one of the most quintessential examples of magical realism. Basically, as a style of fiction, magical realism uses a largely realistic world with realistic detail and characters, but adds magical or supernatural elements without commenting on how unrealistic they are. So stories like Stranger Things or Matilda or Spider-Man, they all have realistic contexts, but they launch into the supernatural in a way that very much disrupts the reality. But How I Met Your Mother stays realistic. It's just a commonplace sitcom like Friends, even though absolutely impossible things happen. The doppelgangers, Barney's whole apartment, musical sequences, things disappear, even a form of time travel. But because these elements are seamlessly incorporated, we come to inhabit a universe that is very much like our own. It's entirely relatable, it's just New York. But it also functions on special magical rules. Right away, episode 1, Ted meets Robin, boy meets girl. He says it's like one of those old-timey movies where the sailor locks eyes with a beautiful woman and just knows that he'll marry her. But then, the camera work, the music, Robin's eye contact, the pacing, the directing, all show us that that's exactly what happened in this universe. It's not just an analogy, it's really there. We're not in the same New York as the Friends characters, or the Seinfeld characters, or the Sex and the City characters. We're in a special, magical New York inhabited by Ted and his friends. In the episode OK, some magic happens. Marshall and Lily each jump out of their third-story apartment and land fine. Marshall takes a pill in the bathroom that transformed him into a hyper-dancing machine. Okay, that one could be real. The friends are able to communicate using hand gestures, and that's intentional fantasy. We, the audience, get subtitles because no way could anyone understand the gestures, but by this point, we know this group. They have their own universe. Of course they can understand each other as a group, even though Ted couldn't communicate to his date. In FOMO, weird stuff happens. Not magic, weird. Sophie and Ian, in their own worlds, each see Jason Momoa lookalikes. This is clearly supposed to be a play on How I Met Your Mother doppelgangers, but Jason Momoa himself isn't in this episode, so they just look like him, sort of. Not in a wow, that's a stretch, you guys clearly wanted to flirt. It's just a weird thing. Valentina is hyped about FOMO as a club because it has so many exciting rooms. A tapas room, a topless room, a hula hoop room. Obviously unrealistic and almost magical. But it's just described once. We don't actually see any of those crazy rooms, and the joke is just that it's unrealistic. That's the joke. They clearly wanted FOMO to match the theme of the episode, but they treated it instead as a one-off setup to punchline joke.
A room, a foam party room, a topless room, a tapas room, a topless tapas room.
They say there's no such thing as having FOMO inside of FOMO.
There is no sense of universe to How I Met Your Father, and that's partially because we don't meet all the characters in the middle of a pre-established routine. They don't have long-standing traditions or a distinct group humor or vibe because most of them have just met. Also, we're missing a certain rhythm to the way this created world works. I can't really extrapolate patterns and rules the way I can for How I Met Your Mother, where in episode 1, Barney says, "Have you met Ted?" And that line comes up again and again for the entire show from multiple characters, creating a microcosm within the setting. We don't have that here, and I think that's because the writers were so focused on establishing the year 2022 that they forgot the year this story takes place in doesn't really matter. Boy Meets Girl is a timeless story. It's way more important to have an engaging story world that keeps us coming back for more than it is to convince us that we're in 2022. Also, and again, I don't really care that much, but the pop cultural references feel like they were written by someone who asked their kids for tips or something, not someone who actually knows what 22 is like at all. But moving on to the most annoying letdown. Most annoying because it was the easiest to get right, and they clearly got a big win in signing Hilary Duff, and everything revolves around this, so why they didn't put any effort into How I Met Your Mother is a story. We're listening to a man tell a story, and it comes with features of storytelling. There are a few times when adult Ted will get confused and realize he's messed up the order of things, but I really mean more in how he heats up the truth. He exaggerates because he's trying to convey a feeling, not just a series of events. All of the magical realism works for humor and drama, but moreover for how older Ted holds and views his own life. And he really wants his kids and us to really feel that effect. Also, older Ted is presented as a bit corny. He's got classic dad humor, he's very sweet and endearing, and you can hear that there's this past life in his voice. By having him off screen, we get to hear this narrator almost like a bedtime story, and we get to sort of imagine what adult Ted might be like in reality. Older Sophie, though, is just repeating things that happened with occasional sassy, not funny commentary. The whole concept of the story of storytelling as a core tenet of the show is executed only to maintain the original premise. It's just checking off a formulaic box. She strolls around with this glass of wine, and look, I love the actress, but something about the smugness really grates me. With Ted's story, we get this sense that the old times are gone. We hear Uncle Marshall or Aunt Robin, and we know that the kids have at least met these people, but the spirit, the essence, the flow of Ted's former life is a lost piece of nostalgia for him that is still very important in his heart. And, crucially, young Ted is not the same person as older Ted. Ted has grown and changed. When we first meet Ted, Marshall's proposal to Lily has him taking a look at his own life and wondering if he should settle down too. The pilot is largely focused on Ted's introspection, with two core pieces of his identity represented by other characters, Barney being youthful and independent and irresponsible, and Marshall showing commitment and stability. Though Ted decides he does want a serious relationship, he's not ready for one. Time and time again, including the episode OK, we see him screw up relationships with great women. In fact, he dates so many people and does so much stupid crap that some viewers really hate him. In season 1, he cheats on Victoria, he lies to Robin. Later on, he rushes into a marriage with Stella. His problem is that there are way too many paths and options, and he can't navigate them. He's not ready. Sophie, on the other hand, doesn't really have flaws, more like endearing quirks. Her problem is that she's been on 87 Tinder dates and they've all been duds, which, first of all, 87 in a year? That is way too many, but what a wasted opportunity to use 83 as a callback to Barney always using 83 for his exaggerations and maybe making it seem like she's exaggerating and blaming other people when really it's about her, but whatever. Sophie and Ted are both romantics, no doubt, but Ted is on an internal journey that leads up to him becoming the person he had to be when he met Tracy. Sophie's big problem is mostly external. In season 1, she's hung up on Ian, but I feel like they forgot we only saw Ian in like 2 scenes before he left, so we don't really care. We care way more about Jesse or Drew, I guess. Drew sucks. So we're not really invested in her issue. Ted's problem of not knowing what he should be doing in life and not really feeling or being ready for any of it is pretty universal. So in How I Met Your Mother, we have a flawed and quixotic everyman hero. In How I Met Your Father, Sophie She's fine, she's really nice, she's earnest, she's hopeful, and though they do introduce her mother as an emotional burden, that problem kind of comes and goes in one episode and doesn't really match up with what she's grappling with as a character. It's also worth noting that Sophie is a photographer. There's a whole mini plot about how she's struggling to succeed as an artist and needs to be with someone who understands that and supports her. But it's not reflected in her character at all. I would have no idea she were an artist if I weren't told so. I mean, that's a pretty big personality feature. It should be, being an artist who believes in the power and beauty and need for her art above a quote-unquote reliable career. I'd love to see more of that and know how it affects her, but it just doesn't at all. Ted's career makes a lot of sense. First of all, they're consistent in having him be an architecture nerd and using that for humor throughout the series. But above that, it works thematically for his character. Ted's often torn between preserving the old and fighting for the new. He sees things in negative space. He dreams of building in every aspect of life. It's such a shame and such a waste of charisma in Hilary Duff. And again, she's not hugely distinct from Ted, but she's not exactly a replica either. And at this point, I would just prefer that. The final big problem is the most stark contrast between the two shows, and it's the most important ingredient to any sitcom or drama, whether it be Gossip Girl or Friends or Abbott Elementary, and that's the friend group. The magic of the friend group is integral to How I Met Your Mother. The show doesn't work unless we want to hang out with these people. We want to sit at the bar with them every day. We want to be their friends. And in How I Met Your Mother, we become their friends because they bring us in through running gags and various Easter eggs. How I Met Your Mother, though, had some real problems with diversity and race in general, so it is super refreshing and very important to have a better and more accurate mix of main characters. But the friend group in How I Met Your Father, in contrast, was very much written from the top down rather from the inside out. I'll explain. So, Ellen has moved to the city to start over after her divorce, but I actually completely forgot about that because it really doesn't matter. She's super excited all the time to get out there and flirt, and it seems like the writers thought, okay, why might that be? She has to be really fun and excited. She just got divorced, and that explains why she just moved here, and that explains why she doesn't know much about the city and acts really stupid. But a divorce, a move, a whole new life should determine internal character points for her that never really emerge. They're just shoved into dialogue to remind us that they are there, technically, on the storyboard. It seems like they created Sid because they wanted a marshal, someone in a committed relationship who could support the male lead, but he's pointless. I don't know why he's here. I don't know anything about him. Top-down character writing is checking off a list. It's starting with the end result of the friend group and then adding on characterization, which lands us with pretty stiff and uncompelling characters. Charlie is infatuated with Valentina. He's abandoned his inheritance and moved across the ocean for her. And we find out he's actually moved across an ocean for someone else before, but I have no idea why. It's very frustrating. And looking at How I Met Your Mother for a second, right? Barney has an entire core to his character that leads to some entertaining external behavior. So his crazy stunts aren't arbitrary. By the end of season 1, we know all about his first girlfriend and why his version of success is so important to him. Now, I don't know if they did this or not, but it definitely feels like the How I Met Your Mother writers sat down and created each of their characters' life stories, emotional vulnerabilities, families, dreams, challenges, before even writing the first episode. So as details emerge, as we meet people from their past, we piece things together. And I'm only talking about season 1. The nuance and slow burn developments thereafter are next level. In How I Met Your Mother, everyone's occupations really line up with who they are and what they want from life. Marshall wants to be an environmental lawyer because that's the result of who he is. He cares about the world. He even believes in ghosts and stuff like that because he's an idealist. He can dream and believe, and he enacts justice all around him through his relationships on a smaller level. He really pushes his friends to do the right thing. Valentina, in How I Met Your Father, Valentina's an assistant stylist. It matches her persona because she dresses well. I don't know. That's all I got. But the main issue with the friend group is honestly just that they are stupid. These people are dumb, and it's not that fun to watch. Their choices are stupid. They act really dumb. Sophie has a Christina Aguilera-themed 30th birthday party, fine, and she rapidly converts it into a more classy affair to impress Drew. But man, is she dumb while she's doing it. Meanwhile, Ted also throws a stupid party to impress Robin, but they don't feel the need to have him jumping around and putting fake books on display for it to be funny. When Ted throws that party, it's actually kind of a serious moment. He's realizing, man, I just gotta keep playing. I just can't give up. And they let the humor come to them. They don't start with the humor and then force some sort of story onto it. But getting back to OK vs. FOMO, look at how the supporting characters act. In FOMO, Ellen feels like this 13-year-old idiot child lost in a candy store. Sid has no purpose, he's just there. Charlie is falling for the dumbest lies fed to him by Valentina. I get it, he's British, he doesn't know American customs. No one would fall for the crap that she tells him. And it's a bad idea to lie to him too. They are all acting really dumb. In OK, Robin, Marshall, and Lily are each on their own journey, and Lily's is actually really the poignant one of the episode. Barney does not have that much to do, but he still manages to tell a little story, and his stupidity doesn't ever feel stupid because it's so self-aware, and because Neil Patrick Harris, he just brings this great dramatic energy to even the silliest of scenes. The How I Met Your Mother characters, they do stupid crap all the time, but they're not forced into setup punchline Disney Channel-esque dumb humor, and they tend to do stupid stuff as a result of very relatable internal struggles. So here's a solid test. Would you watch an episode where How I Met Your Mother characters just sit around the table and talk? For me, absolutely yes. Those are my favorite scenes, whether they're in a heated argument over something random, or unpacking something serious, or more often doing both at once. And with the How I Met Your Father characters, God no, I don't even know what that would look like. The show revolves around putting cartoonish two-dimensional characters into contrived situations that are supposed to be funny. Haha, Valentina and Charlie made up, so haha, they go have sex in a closet. That's the joke, sex in a closet, funny. I don't know. But the friend group in How I Met Your Mother is on a journey together. There are constant references to how life and dating is a game that you have to play. This game opens up to us in season 1, and by the end, each character has been through the game and ended up in different places. And that's just season 1. Moreover, there aren't really subplots in How I Met Your Mother. By that I mean, yes, the characters go off and they do different things, but it's all part of one story. You couldn't remove a single thread of any episode without ruining the whole tapestry. Everyone in How I Met Your Father is sprawled out into different games, different plots. The friend group lacks one cohesive narrative underlying all their various plots, so I don't really care about what happens to each of them. And that's very much true in the individual episode of FOMO as well as the whole season. I do care a bit about Sophie and Jesse. I like them together. I think their common understanding of being struggling artists does work as their point of connection, and I will say I am excited to see how their competing love interests with Ian and Meredith, Jesse's ex, shake things up in season 2. But I want to care about more than the leads. And if you cut out all the scenes of adult Sophie establishing the framed narrative, I would have no idea that this was a How I Met Your Mother follow-up show. Mainly because it's simply missing the nostalgic chemistry of a well-established friend group.
Iceman 2.
So, in conclusion, I wanted to like it. I tried really hard to like it, and by the last few episodes, I almost like it. Part of the problem is also that season 1 of How I Met Your Father is only 10 short episodes, and considering the incredibly mediocre first few, that's just not enough time for us, and was a really weird decision that I again categorize as pretty cowardly. It ends sort of just as things get interesting, so I do have some hope that the show will find its stride in the next season, but I think it would take a whole new writing approach to level up the dialogue and characterization to even come close to the caliber of How I Met Your Mother. How I Met Your Mother is a silly sitcom show, but sometimes I can't even rewatch it because it makes me too emotional. It's absolutely masterful at seeming like one big joke and then just gutting you with these really emotional beats.
And you've been sitting here all night staring at a single ticket to Robots vs. Wrestlers because the rest of us couldn't come out. Look around, Ted. You're all alone.
There are a few scenes on their own that carry weight most TV shows can't achieve in their entire runtime. Lily telling Marshall that his dad has died, Lily telling Ted that sometimes she wishes she weren't a mom, Barney breaking down in front of his dad, Robin telling Ted she doesn't love him. They are all unbelievably poignant, and even if nothing like that has ever happened to you, they still feel relatable because A, they do pull us into the friend group, and B, the way characters process even outlandish incidents is rooted in exploring what it means to be alive, how we navigate life, how we get through life. How I Met Your Mother takes that sort of Seinfeld classic sitcom launch of a show about nothing. Ted's just a guy living his life, but adds a storytelling lens so that every moment, every breakup, every night out, every Thanksgiving, every what if, every choice becomes magical and important, yet also relatable for everyone who's ever been in love or been hurt or been lost because it's a story. It's a witty, self-aware show that pokes fun at its own character tropes and its premise, but then smacks you with deep emotion that isn't contrived. The only thing really unrealistic is the magical realism. Maybe, like, Lily's dad is a bit too cartoonish, but Lily's pain that he was never there when it mattered most so she can't trust him isn't cartoonish at all. Ted building Robin a Christmas-light musical show in her apartment is a little fantastical, but the idea of a friend saying, "Fine, you won't tell me what you're going through, but I will never stop trying to cheer you up," isn't fantastical at all. I could go on, and I've rewatched this show a lot, but the older I get, the more I appreciate it, and the more I think about it, the more annoyed I am that this follow-up failed. Because in many ways, How I Met Your Mother is an ode to storytelling itself. I know people don't like the ending, but the fact that Ted's very telling of the story is a manifestation of love, and you don't even have to read that as love for Robin, it's also love for Marshall, and Lily, and Barney, and his own past self, life itself. It's really touching to me, and even ending aside, the framed narrative of How I Met Your Mother is like its secret sauce. It opens up so many doors for story worlds, nostalgia, and a broad narrative that can underlie each episode and the entire show. The entire saga is happening in adult Ted's mind as he looks back on it. Even though it's all in the past, it's very much still real to him. It's still happening in a way. They even change up the structure of some episodes to play on the idea of telling a story, like Subway Wars, which breaks down into why each character needed a win that day, or 3 Days of Snow, or Robots v. Wrestlers. This heightens the show out of sitcom territory and highlights that it is a story being told. How I Met Your Mother is a hilarious show that takes the art of fiction and the concept of fiction seriously. How I Met Your Father has no such ethos, not yet anyway, and it seems like they just printed out a list of boxes to tick and just went through them one by one so they could use the same font and intro song and ride on previous success for viewership. Putting those things aside, all the little things they do just to technically match up as a remake, it's way closer to a Friends reboot than a How I Met Your Mother one. So far, it sort of feels like that kid who's trying way too hard to be the popular kid, so just copies everything the popular kid does, but can't quite get it right, but also isn't doing their own thing, so just is sort of weird and lost. How I Met Your Mother had its own sense of indie music, for example, for a soundtrack that Joss Radnor actually helped curate, but How I Met Your Father doesn't have enough personality to have its own music taste, and it's obsessed with situating itself in modern times, so it really doesn't do either, and it lands pretty much nowhere. I am curious to see how the love triangles unfold, but frankly, I don't care about Sophie. I don't find her relatable. She doesn't seem like a real human to me, and I don't have any interest in being part of their weird little new friend group. I wish I could characterize How I Met Your Father the way I just did How I Met Your Mother, but I really can't, and I watched it nearly 3 times to figure it out. There simply isn't much there. I'll say it again, it's a cowardly show. You won't get anything inspiring or new here, but you also won't get that unique How I Met Your Mother flavor. Because it tries so hard to pack in lame sitcom jokes and contemporary references, not a single scene seems like normal human interaction or an intentionally over-the-top satire. It just lands sorta nowhere, and it's really hard even to talk about it because there is just so much nothing. I mean, sometimes I think I might be being a little too hard on a show that I actually almost enjoyed, But How I Met Your Father won 2 Emmys and was instantly renewed, and it really exemplifies just how low the bar is becoming for writing and storytelling. There's just so much content out there that slapping on a familiar title and signing a few big names will land you an Emmy, I guess, which kind of breaks my heart when I think about all the untold stories out there, all the boy meets girl stories that we won't get to hear because instead we're constantly fed this crap. And it's fake, it's superficial, it's written from the outside in, striving to achieve optics only and no essence. How I Met Your Mother comes from the inside out. Ted and Marshall are based on the creators of the show, who drew a lot from their own experiences as friends in Chicago. And that's why the idea of stories is so prevalent. It's a story. The very premise of the show plays around with the ideas of memory and the past. And that theme is interwoven throughout all the seasons. Barney often manifests an obsession with creating memories, always doing the wildest thing possible for the story, and it's stories that Barney turns to help him through reality. At one point he says, "A lie is just a good story someone ruined with the truth." There's even a running bit amongst Marshall, Lily, and Ted that whoever Ted ends up with has to pass the front porch test. The characters imagine themselves as old and gray, sitting on a front porch and sharing stories years down the line. Even as the day-to-day crap of their lives unfold, the future haunts them. The idea that what they're doing now will be all they have left down the line haunts them. And for all the crazy stuff that happens, it's really the routine nothingness that comprises the meaning of their lives. So at this point, if you want more of How I Met Your Mother, just rewatch How I Met Your Mother. It gets better every time.
Do you have any idea what happened right here in this very bar?
No. What happened?
Just all kinds of stuff.